Welcome to the new EnviroGold Global YouTube channel. Today we're going to be sitting down with CEO Dr. Mark Thorpe to go over the new Buchans Delta Rehabilitation project and talk a little bit more about the company in general. Mark, why don't we start with, what is the why behind EnviroGold Global?
Yeah, thank you. We believe that we can produce metals without mining. We want to contribute to the emerging economy. And we do this by deploying modular, scalable equipment. And we do it very quickly. And to produce the precious and strategic metals, we reprocess mine tailings for reduced environmental effect and also to the benefit of local and regional stakeholders.
And Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about the team here at EnviroGold Global that's going to be working on these projects?
The EnviroGold story really is not about process, and it's not about metal contents. It's really about the people and the team behind the company. I'm very fortunate that I have an amazing team with about 500 years in total skills available to help us develop this portfolio of projects. And I'll quote one of my more senior members of the team. He said, "For 45 years, I've been filling up tailings ponds, and now it's my time to start to empty them and get some residual value out of it." I have a team that's animated, having a lot of fun doing what they're doing, and that to me is the success in the business. To make sure that as we move these projects forward, we've got the right people doing the right job and having a fun time doing it. And that will be the key to success of EnviroGold. We can do all the projects in the world, but unless the team is harmonious and working together, then those projects are not worth doing.
So before we start talking about the new project specifically, let's maybe talk about the process in general. With thousands of mining projects out there, how does EnviroGold choose which projects they want to take on?
EnviroGold has developed a screening process for the tailings projects, which are brought to it by various people through various contacts, through companies interested in working with us. We first complete a high-level geological evaluation of the past production and the current production at the mines of interest. Our chief geologist, Ian Hodkinson, has been doing a sterling job of evaluating the projects. And we're looking primarily for projects in excess of 1 million tons with a recoverable metal value of about $100 a ton. That's kind of our cutoff, $80 a ton, depending upon the complexity of the resource. If the project passes Ian's filter, it's passed down to our technical economic modeling team. We have Dan Olvera, Monty Reed, and Sergio De Giovannis, and they complete a full assessment on the project, technical. So what kind of recovery process, what would be the costs? Is there a power cost that we can bring in? What are the labor costs like, that sort of thing? And then there's a financial model that Dan puts together to assess the profitability, what can we sell the metals for, what are the recoveries? And once we've got that technical and economic model completed, then it provides us with a very high level internal rate of return and a net present value, an NPV for the project. And then at that point, we then contact and continue our contact with the tailings owners to then develop a project schedule and sign up the project as part of the EnviroGold portfolio. EnviroGold currently has the main project of the Buchans River Delta, and we're engaged in commercial negotiations on 2 other projects around the world. These are quite exciting, and we're looking to build out our portfolio as we go. We have about another 10 projects that are going through the initial project evaluation phase, and we hope to be able to start the commercial negotiations on some of these early in the new year.
All right, Mark, so moving on now to talk about the new project coming down the pipeline for EnviroGold Global, which is the Buchans River Delta Rehabilitation Project in Newfoundland, Canada. What did the historical mining documents and the assessments that EnviroGold went through from the Newfoundland government sort of reveal about the scope of the project?
The Buchans Delta Rehabilitation Project is our key project, and we signed that up about 3 weeks ago. And we have the rights to reprocess tailings in the Buchans River Delta, and we will be doing so over the next about 7 to 10 years. Our quick evaluation of the project from the historical data showed that between 1928 and about 1984, the Buchans mine produced about 16 million tons of ore, and the grades on the metals were quite high. It's one of the largest VMS deposits in the world. Between 1928 and 1964, the tailings from the process, and it's about 8 million tons that we think from the historical reports, were discharged into the Buchans River. From the Buchans River, they flowed down the river into the delta area where they formed the so-called Buchans River Delta. And it's the claims that are in that Buchans River Delta that we're interested in developing and cleaning up the actual tailings that are sitting on the bottom of the lake, which have high concentrations of heavy metals, obviously deleterious to the environment. We want to take those tailings out of the lake, reprocess them, and place them in a tailings storage facility that is secure and can then be closed properly.
Perhaps you can elaborate a little bit more about the history in the Buchans mining district and sort of tell us how old will the legacy tailings be that you'll be remediating? And also, I guess for the more general public, what are legacy tailings?
So legacy tailings themselves, tailings are the waste product from the production of metals in the mining business. And normally what happens is when you mine the rock, you crush it and grind it to get it into a fine sand or even smaller, from which the metal is recovered. The remaining material, which is called tailings, is then just placed either in the old days into the environment or these days into secure, safe tailings storage facilities. Some of the tailings that we've been looking at for EnviroGold date back to the 1890s. And obviously, there's some of the tailings that we're looking at that are currently being produced. So we hit a range of different tailings from material that's been in place for 120, 130 years to material that is currently being generated. And we can add value to the economy, the local economy, by extracting the residual base, strategic, and precious metals from that tailings material itself.
So Mark, what does the projected timeline look like for this project, and how would that compare to a traditional mining operation?
The typical mining project has a development timeline of between 12 and 15 years from first exploration to metal production, bearing in mind that about 1 in 10,000 exploration projects actually becomes a mine. For the tailings reprocessing projects that we're dealing with, we're aiming to get our projects into production in under 2 years. Why is that possible? Well, if you think about the initial work on a mine is to define the resource. With a tailings resource, we have excellent data, usually from the producing mine or the mine that produced the tailings. And then in order to sample the tailings, it's usually quite simple. You can walk across the tailings, you can sample the tailings just by coring. There's not an expensive program developed. And then we send those tailings, the tailings samples off to our laboratory, which we have just contracted in Vancouver. So we have our own metallurgical laboratory so that we can quickly do the metallurgical analysis, the metals concentrations, and develop the process so that we can then get the design and engineering to build the recovery plant. So in summary, 12 to 15 years for a traditional mining project, costing several tens of millions of dollars. For EnviroGold, we're working to get our projects into production in less than 2 years, and for probable cost to get us to the construction of less than $2 million.
So Mark, perhaps walk us through some of the technology that'll be used on the project and maybe how it's designed and how it's going to process 1,000 tons per day of reclaimed tailings.
So the technology that EnviroGold uses is a combination of our own proprietary patented technology, which is specifically aimed at complex refractory tailings, and then the use of traditional flotation or traditional leaching of the tailings, but in a slightly different way. If the tailings were produced by flotation originally, it's probably not a good idea to try and float them the second time unless you're looking for something different. So what we do is we identify how the metals of interest are reside in the tailings, what kind of metallurgical structure is there, and then we break that down into how we can access the metals that we want, the gold, the silver, the lead, copper, and zinc. And then we design a process that allows us to leach or float, depending on which one we want to do, to produce those metals in either a concentrate or a raw metal phase. So for us, for instance, in the Buchans project, the original production for the mine was for barite, and they took out, in the old days, some of the metals. However, the processes since then have been significantly improved, and we can use a flotation approach to the Buchans project to recover concentrates for things like lead, zinc, and precious metals.
So the company's recently gotten a new laboratory in Vancouver, BC, Canada. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and also how that's going to impact timelines going forward?
When we started working on our projects, we were using commercial laboratories to do the analysis of the tailings, to do the metallurgical testing, to do all of the work that we needed to do. And this was both costly and time consuming. We had to ship samples around North America to get the work done. And we were experiencing considerable delays in receiving data. As speed is one of the key elements for the implementation of our projects, we looked around and we found a partner organization, the GMR Laboratory in Vancouver. And we're delighted to say that we've just signed a lease agreement for that laboratory. And we will now be able to do the majority of our analytical and metallurgical testing in our own laboratory. Samples come in, ours are a priority always, and we're able to get the data in half the time at about the third of the cost of a commercial laboratory. So we are absolutely thrilled that we've got that partnership in place. We have a 1-year renewable lease on the laboratory, and we're working well with the laboratory team, and we've already started on the analysis of our first set of tailing samples.
So Mark, you've spoken about the benefits of remediating sort of this industrial waste, but perhaps elaborate a little bit more on sort of the ecological impact to the environment there, the local residents, and how this is sort of a win-win for all involved, including the stakeholders and the local wildlife there, and of course, the residents of Buchans, Newfoundland.
Benefits of the Buchans River Delta Rehabilitation Project are various. For a start, we're going to do the project with a very low upfront cost with fast implementation. Less than 2 years, start of production of concentrates. The second thing is we're stimulating the local economy. We're expecting to invest a considerable amount of money in the plant, and then there's the operating costs, which would generate about 40 jobs directly and numerous spin-off jobs associated with supporting the production of the metal concentrates from the Buchans River Delta. And the third thing, of course, is probably the most important thing, is that we're doing this as a rehabilitation project, which removes metal-laden tailings from the bottom of the lake so improving environmental outcomes and allowing us at the same time to safely place the tailings in an existing tailings storage facility.
And Mark, you were able to just recently visit the site. Maybe tell us a little bit about how that experience was for you.
My team and I went out in October to Newfoundland. We were out to the actual river delta. We went out and we were able to see firsthand the distribution of tailings across the delta. We then had some community meetings with local stakeholders, and we're receiving very good backing from them. Everybody's positive about the project. They see the environmental, social, and economic benefits to the Buchans community and the surrounding communities. We then took the opportunity to meet with our environmental consultants to plan our work that we're going to be doing with them for the environmental baselines and for the submission of the various environmental requests that we're going to be asking from the Newfoundland government. And then we finally took the opportunity to meet with the environmental regulators in St. John's, Newfoundland. It was a very productive meeting. I'm very pleased to say that as I would expect, and as is usually the case, the regulators are very supportive of a rehabilitation project, particularly one like ours that takes tailings out of the environment and places them in a safe place. We had very fruitful discussions, and we have subsequently submitted the requests for the environmental approvals for the exploration phase for this last quarter of 2021.
And finally, shifting gears here a little bit, Mark, you were able to speak just recently at the Cloud Oktoberfest sort of virtual convention. Tell us a little bit about that process and how people can maybe look forward to more of that content here on the channel soon.
EnviroGold was delighted to be a participant in the Cloud Oktoberfest conference on the 18th and 19th of October this week. I was able to present the EnviroGold story and some information on the Buchans project and Buchans timeline at the conference. We were received very well, and I was delighted to say that there was not enough time to answer all the questions that came from the audience. And so we are responding to those additional questions via email as a post-presentation commitment to Cloud and the Oktoberfest conference.
That was CEO of EnviroGold Global, Dr. Mark Thorpe. And keep your eyes peeled to the YouTube channel here, as we will be getting you some content from that Cloud Oktoberfest speaking. And you can follow us on social media for more updates, including LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram.